Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Today we have an extremely special episode of Have You Met? I know I say that every time, but I think this time it's really true because we're doing something that has never been attempted before, ever, or maybe just on this channel. But we have two wonderful guests for today's episode, and we're going to be chatting about the Long Island theater scene. So my first guest is the founder of One House Productions, and it is Deb Rupy.
Hello, everyone.
And my second phenomenal guest today is a Long Island-based theater maker, and she also sits on the creative board of Eastline Theatre. It's Nicole Savin.
Hello.
The Long Island theater scene generally is super dear to my heart in a lot of ways because I grew up here. I fell in love with theater here, and now that I'm back, I'm sort of rediscovering it after being away for basically 8 years. And I'm so curious to know, for each of you, what has your artistic journey been like on Long Island, off Long Island, all the places you've been, and how have you gotten to the point you're at today?
Okay. I've always, even as a young child, of course, I'm sure all of us have always been interested in the arts, and theater being one of those. But I was enrolled in a Catholic school for most of my elementary. And in the 70s, the only true art that you got in Catholic school was maybe a poster design for one of the holidays, and singing in the choir, church choir, and performing the nativity scene at the end of the year for the seniors in the school. So by the time I got to sixth grade, I realized I want to do something more with arts. I want to do more. And at that point in time, there weren't a lot of dance schools or theater classes, and this was out in Suffolk County. And I asked my parents if they would enroll me in public school, and they did. And immediately I auditioned for the musicals. And I think when I was in seventh grade, I was cast as Peter Pan, and we did the Mary Martin script, and I flew with a harness. Thank you, George Morback, who was the director of that. Can you imagine? And strings.
Wow, in high school.
In junior high, seventh grade.
Wow.
Yeah, we had a great proscenium stage. We had a nice theater department. And so I love my memories at St. Isidore's in Riverhead. But when I got over to public school, I was able to really open up. And at that point in time, I think I was hooked ever since. Studied theater at Oneonta State, did a year in Ireland at the Abbey Theater, and then did come back to Long Island. So, but that's really where my journey started. And on Long Island, of course, when I was back from college, I would walk the streets of Manhattan for work and auditions. But at the same time, I would also work in all the local community theaters, more on the East Shore.
I don't really know where mine started. Neither of my parents was artsy. I always say that my dad, before I came into the picture, the only Broadway show he'd ever seen was he'd taken a date to see Evita with Patty LuPone.
Wow, that's
So
a choice.
yeah, and my mother's first Broadway show was with me. So it was very like, neither of them was especially into it. I saw Camelot when I was 8 at that local high school, and I think that's what started it, but I also think that I was into it before then. But my dad has always been a really vivid storyteller in that he'll give all of the characters in his stories voices. So I think I was sort of just ended up this way. I mean, I was involved in school theater to some extent. Lindenhurst, the high school I attended, has a fairly robust theater program. You will meet a lot of Lindenhurst graduates in Long Island theater in general. And I was also involved in community theater as a teenager. I then went on to do a degree in theater at Royal Holloway University of London. And ever since I've been involved with, I'm an associate director at By Jove Theatre in London. And I've also, since 2016, been involved at Eastline Theatre, lately of Wantagh. I've been the associate artistic director there and have served on the board and have performed in a lot of shows there as well. And Eastline is a place where people seem to get back into theater. We're frequently people's first theater experience after a time away, which was the case for me. So I'm glad in the interim, I was seeing a lot of theater, but I wasn't so much participating in it between college and when I came to Eastline, but I'm glad I found it.
What do you think for each of you influenced your decision to either found a company or join a creative board?
When I first came to Eastline, it was because I was sort of scoping out that brief Newsday audition section every week and checking Deb's web, and it was the only theater I saw myself auditioning at all, because at the time, especially in 2016, it was really much more musical focused, and I didn't really want to do that. I was looking for plays. So every month, they'd announce a few play auditions, and I'd be like, okay, that's the one that's doing what I want to do. So eventually I ended up there. I performed in plays there first, and then Danny one day was like, would you want to direct? And I was like, I had directed in college, but yes, actually, I do really want to direct. Thank you for asking. That's all it took, really. Honestly, somebody asking, do you want to?
I'm in my studies in upstate New York, and also in my studies in Ireland, even though my main focus was performance, I'm the kind of person, and I think many of the teachers that I worked with, instructors that I worked with, including the Abbey Theater, they wanted me to see design, costume, set. So I've always been involved on the production end as well. And my first experience on a board, I sat on the North Fork Community Theater Board in Mattituck, Long Island, right after college. And I had done a lot of youth programs there and some musicals, but they also had a slate of plays interdispersed. So I sat on their board for many years, and it's interesting. I think I was, at that point in time, it was in the mid 80s, I was the first female board member that took care of building maintenance. I wasn't the first female board member, but I was the first female board member that was assigned to taking care of the building, which at that point in time was absolutely unheard of. And I think I was the first person, not to pick on anybody, to notice that the reason that we had floods in the basement is because we had no gutters on the building. So they didn't need a man to let them know that. So that was my first step into being on a board of a theater, and I did do a lot of work there. But at the same time, I served as the production manager. I also did many plays there, but I was always involved on the production end of it, helped out with costumes. For me, as an actress, and this is just personal, I like to know all of the pieces as much as I can. I'm horrible at lighting, I'm horrible at set, even set design, I think, but I like to know a little bit about it. So I do get involved on that end as well. As far as my company, I love the classics, everybody does. And I know you've all heard me go on about this, but I really, really, my heart is really with new stories. And while I was on the board at Eastline, while I was president at Eastline, I started to develop that love of the original works. And there were many people that were interested as well. We did some shows in the city. We met, some local writers. But after a time, I said, I really need to focus a little bit more on that. So when I moved away a little bit from Eastline, I did a little more of the original works, tried to tap into some of the other avenues on the island to do that. And I will say that One House kind of grew more during the beginning of the pandemic, because we were able to kind of reach different groups of people that we were never able to reach before.
There are a bunch of things that each of you touched on that I think are super interesting when we're talking about like developing theater on Long Island and what the theater scene excels at and what the community excels at, because I think the theater scene and the community are sometimes representative one of the other and sometimes not. And sometimes by looking at the local theater scene, you can see what we have and what we're missing. I think coming back to Long Island after college, the thing that really struck me was I had very limited experience with female directors on Long Island. I had very little contact with any female creative board members or artistic directors, which is another reason why I wanted to chat with both of you today, because I do think it's quite a male-dominated field on Long Island.
I have sat in a room of like local Long Island theater leadership, and I have been the only woman there. We sat around a big table and I was the only woman there, and I just felt like I shouldn't have to be in this position where I am the only representative of an entire half of humanity, and we are the majority in the theater community on Long Island, far and away. Like, when we have auditions for good plays with women's roles, it's crazy. 500 people turn up. So I have definitely had experience with it. I have definitely encountered people who don't necessarily have confidence in what I say, don't necessarily take me seriously. But the staff at Eastline is majority women. I feel I'm able to have my voice at Eastline.
When I first started sitting on boards on Long Island in the theater, they were hesitant about giving me, Deb, would you consider taking care of a building? Of course I would. I mean, why wouldn't I? I will say that, like I said, was in the 80s. I've seen quite a big change, and I do. There's way more to go, but I have some of the same feelings, Nicole. There were times when I did sit on that board and would say things about the gutter or the heater, and it would just be almost like an okay. But I have seen a change, and kudos to them for giving me that position. Kudos for Eastline for having me be president when I was owner and sat on the board. Those are big changes that I saw. So I've seen that change, but I've seen that improve. It's still not where it needs to be, and that's one of the things we hope to do with One House is, I mean, we want to make our base, but we want to reach out to those groups of people, communities of people that aren't even aware. It's just the outreach to get out there and say, yes, you'll be accepted here, no matter what. That's what part of our mission statement is, that we're a creative place for everybody to come and just hone their craft and share their craft, and no judgment. So I think that things are going in the right direction, as you see the three of us here.
I'm hearing exactly what you're saying, Deb, is that there's a lot of change. And also, Nicole, what you're saying is that I think for us, it's still like that feeling
not
of
enough change.
Not enough change, exactly. And I think that is so critical in a lot of ways, to constantly be looking and saying what still can change. And one of the things I did want to talk about, and I messaged both of you about this, is that although it's brilliant to have a meeting like this, that's, we're a group of women / non-binary creators all together on a Zoom call chatting about making art and being in a position of agency and creative agency on Long Island. However, we're also still, a group of white women chatting. And when I wanted to do this interview, I was like, where are the BIPOC creators and board members and people that I can ask to be on the Zoom call? And what populations are still underrepresented, not only in creative boards and positions of power within the theater community on Long Island, but even in casts and in outreach. What are both of your organizations doing to sort of address this diversity gap? And do you consider it when you're choosing what plays to work on or things to produce in your seasons?
Yes, for One House, like I said, for me, the first step is awareness, and we're definitely there. We are aware. The second step is, I feel, is the outreach, because it's getting the information out there that we need you, we want you. So I work hard to make sure that the artists that work with me, the original artists that work with me are happy and comfortable. And I think that word will spread, but that's not enough of an outreach. So one of our goals is to get in touch with some of the local and even national, international groups to involve more groups of people, to make us more diverse. I will say that our monologues we started small, and that was very, very local. But when we entered the world scene, our One Act Play Festival, we were thrilled with the diversity. We had play nominations from Korea, submissions from Korea, submissions from Australia. We had submissions from trans writers, every different group. So that again is a nice start. Our next step is to reach out to some of those groups, and see, just make them aware that this is a place where they can come and create.
I would say our programming has been extremely thrown off by the pandemic, obviously. But we were set to have a season of entirely plays by women, and we intend in the future to program plays, at least 50% plays by women and another 50, not another 50%, but 50% by people of color. And we also are working towards transparency in our directing process. Is why we opened an open bidding system for directors 2 years ago, in the interest of people are able to bid a show that they would like to direct, and they can, and we interview directors, and this is how we get new directors, because I found personally that the system for having new directors or new creatives in general was sort of very opaque at other theaters, and it just sort of happened. Somebody was directing a play, but I wasn't sure, like, how did they get that job? So we've tried to make the process much more transparent, and we are able to pick up new directors and new creatives that way. We are also, I would say, inclusive to a fault in our casting. And we do try to cast based on who is right for the role rather than gender or ethnicity or any other outward factor.
We do that as well. I don't know if it's the right term, but we're conscious of our casting, and of our directing. Was also interesting and nice for us to see when we originally put out our calls for directors for the One House Play Festival. We got no pictures, just resumes, and we weeded down from there, because that's the way we work, or that's the way I live. I'm not concerned about your sexual preference or the color of your skin or your politics or your religion, your views on that. We chose you as a director because of your work. And it was nice to see that. And it was nice to see the differences in the people that we were able to use in that production. So we are conscious of assigning directors, of course, dramaturgs if they're needed, in areas that we may not be as learned in.
I agree with you. Auditions are, for me, an important part in inclusivity. For example, we don't require a headshot. We just say, bring a photo of yourself. Just small things that will make people feel like, oh, I can do that. It's not too much pressure. I don't have to, I don't need to pay the money to get a professional headshot. If I don't have a resume, that's fine. I can fill out the form they have. So just small steps to making it feel more approachable for people.
You want to have as big as a community as possible, and include everyone. Don't forget anyone. And yes, you're right. There are certain actors, directors that are perfect for certain productions, and that's fabulous. And it's wonderful to have a good reputation and to be very good at what you do. But I would hate to miss that little, pearl in the oyster just because, you're always doing the same thing. And that's safe and that's comfortable. But I think we've all learned that in the last few months that we have other things to worry about being safe about. Let's not be safe about this. Let's be unsafe. Let's take a chance. Let's do something totally different.
Something I've been doing a lot during the pandemic is thinking about, like, what happens next? Where will we go? And I was wondering if either of you have any sort of aspirations for what the Long Island theater scene could look like in the next 5 years.
Danny and I frequently talk about how there are 3 million people on this island. We should be able to support a bunch of different theaters, all creating different work. So I think long term, we are working towards the Long Island theater scene being a sustainable thing in general, being able to keep audiences, grow new audiences. I'm sure many of you are aware the audience age on Long Island skews quite old. So I think that it's important that we grow in younger communities, people of color. So that's sort of like the long-term goal, is make this industry sustainable at all. But Danny and I always talk about like our long-term reach goals. Like one day our tickets will be free. One day we'll be paying actors what they deserve. We just have a lot of, there are many idealized things we would love to do, and we would love for, we were talking recently about in New Jersey, they've started funding their theaters on a local level. I think it was in Newark, maybe passed like a new city tax that would fund local performing arts organizations. So I would love if one day Long Island became a place where the community cared deeply about the arts enough that we valued the arts in our communities in that way. So that's a long-term goal, obviously, to make ourselves vital to life on Long Island, to create new audiences who see theater as a vital thing in their life, as I do in mine.
Zoom is really nice, but it's that intimate theater experience that we all want to go back to. So I'm hoping for a safe, live theater experience as soon as possible. Of course, I'm looking to further grow One House, because I feel one way to get that younger audience is through the new and current stories. And a lot of people have reached out to the arts during this time of pandemic and shutdown. And I agree with you on that, Nicole. Why isn't there more support? Why has there never been that support? And it's not, that's another place where there just isn't enough change. There isn't enough change. In the future, I foresee One House doing live productions with many of the local theaters, just adding that original chunk and possibly bringing in that different audience. For us, that's my main goal.
Certainly for us as well, we've learned some lessons from the pandemic and accessibility, and I'm hoping that is something we'll take into the future as well. Things like live streaming capabilities, using virtual platforms as a supplement to live performance as well. I can see us like streaming a public domain show on the last night of the run, live online, things like that. Trying to make it as accessible as possible to audiences who may not attend or can attend for whatever reason.
I don't often get to talk about the Long Island theater scene without sort of looking towards New York, and a lots of times. Something that I think is really inspiring is thinking about our community as a resource, not only as an audience, but as a source for stories, as a source for engagement. And I think an engagement that goes both ways. Like, yes, we'll be feeding them, but then also our communities will feed us as arts organizations and say, this is what we're interested in. Here's the stories we want to tell, and here's the stories we want to see. I just think that that's like the most brilliant thing that theater can do.
I agree. We're the largest island in the contiguous United States, and we don't, and like places much smaller than us see themselves as like an individual culture. So we too need to gift ourselves that autonomy to say that we are a place and we deserve culture.
We are nearing the end of our interview, and this has been really lovely to hear you all chat about the theater scene and your organizations. But I thought we could end with a more personal question. And my question for you is, and you can answer it as personally or as sort of broad scale as you like, but what are your artistic goals?
I'm looking to bring something really new and different. As some of you may know, Christopher and I have put many feelers out in different areas. And since the monologues and the play festival, we've been reached out to by, in one instance, a publisher. And we, as Elena knows, we did some interpretive dramatizations of some excerpts of some new stories. And I find that's bringing me on a road of really creating with artistic people something a little different. That's just kind of the beginning of it, I'm thinking. So I'm looking for that to grow and looking for where that really, really has its place. In the very near future, we're going to be working with a local poet who just published her first book of poems. They're a little on the edgy side, so we're going to be looking for some actors to do some interpretive dramatization, not readings, interpretive dramatizations of several of her poems. That's one of my goals, to really have one house find something different and new to add to initially the Long Island scene of theater and eventually, you know, the world.
I feel like I have so many goals because there are so many me's. Like the theater goer me every year tries to see a play a week. So I'm always trying to hit that goal, always trying to hit that goal. The reader in me is always trying to read a play a week. I'm always trying to expand my base of play knowledge. And one of my personal projects at Eastline has been Eastline Book Club, which started as a monthly in-person, we would do a reading as a group of people. And we attracted like a base of like local actors as well as some of our regular audience members. So it was an interesting group of people. And then during the pandemic, it became once a week. So now we meet via Zoom once a week. And I feel like we're like they're a group of avid theater readers. But I feel like that's part of my goal, to introduce people to new plays that they haven't read before. And I don't know, I guess I remember the first time I knew what an artistic director was. I was like 9 years old. I was at CM and I realized what Noel Ruiz did. And I was like, he picks what we do. That's great. So I guess my end life goal here, end game, is sort of expand what people's image of theater is. And I think theater should be a vital thing in everyone's lives. And I think that we as a society on the whole, not just Long Island, have fallen away from that, fallen away from seeing live performance as something vital to who we are as human beings. And I would like more people to see that. And I think in other places throughout the country, it seems more vital to them because Broadway isn't an hour train ride away. But here on Long Island, we see Broadway as sort of a once a year thing. It's very expensive. People can't see themselves becoming regular theater goers, when I would like to make the whole world regular theater goers. It should be just something you do, like going to a restaurant. After you go to the restaurant, go to see a play. That's how I feel it should be.
Those are both incredible goals. And not only are they incredible goals, they're things that I find exciting as like just a Long Islander, that could be possible for our community, and that there are organizations that are viewing our community in a way that is like uplifted and innovative, rather than just like, we're going to fill seats, or we're going to bring, you know, the same 4 musicals that are going in every major city, and without any thoughts like, what do we need here? How can we make it so that it's, like Nicole, like you're saying, like an active, vital thing, rather than, you know, something a bit mindless or holiday, that it can be an everyday thing. Thank you both for agreeing to be here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having
It's
us.
been a pleasure.
Like every interview I do, if you want to learn more about One House, I'm going to link down in the description below to both the website and the YouTube channel. On the YouTube channel, you can find a whole bunch of things. You can find the book reading for MCM that Deb was just talking about, which I participated in. You can find the monologues, the Long Island Pause monologues, as well as the series of one acts that just happened recently, which were really wonderful. And I'm going to link to the Eastline Theatre page and also the Eastline YouTube channel, where you can find, oh my gosh, so much, a series of poems that are centered on Long Island and also feature gorgeous videography of Long Island nature, including the Long Island Sound. You can find a pandemic version of The Importance of Being Earnest, which I also appear in.
And she's hilarious. Hilarious.
Thank you. And on the Eastline Facebook page, you can get involved in a whole bunch of Eastline initiatives. They do a podcast on Fridays at midnight. You can join the Eastline Book Club, as Nicole was chatting about. Especially if you're from Long Island, please do check out these gorgeous theater organizations and get involved, because they're working really hard to promote Long Island and what makes Long Island special and creative and wonderful. This has been Have You Met with Deborah Rupy and Nicole Savin. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye. And of course, I will have to just put this out there. It's been really wonderful working with my husband as well. And it's given us the opportunity to really work nicely together. And because some of it is taped and there's video involved and editing, it's been nice for us to kind of share that together. And he even went on, he talked on YouTube. That's not what he does.